Jay Bolton is the Director of C Business Solutions, normally behind the mic as a host, but we've put you in the hot seat because people want to hear more from you and your experience, specifically today about investments. But I'd like to know, firstly, McDonald's or KFC? You're the epitome of good health and fitness, but...
I wouldn't say that. I'd have to go McDonald's because it's nothing better than a mighty McMuffin meal of a morning on a long trip, and a double quarter pounder meal I had on the weekend on the way home after a fishing trip. So,
sorry, both in the same day?
No, probably once every 3 months, I'd say.
Nice. Is it possible, Jay, to retire young? I did a business degree, and when I was in my 20s, we were all keen on Fridays on the golf course. And we were all very keen to retire at 35. It hasn't happened for me, hasn't happened for you. And I've got a few mates that could dabble in retirement, could think about it, but they're just so ingrained in their business and can't really get out just yet. Can you do it?
Well, there's a bit of a craze going on at the moment. The FIRE, what is it? Financially Independent Retire Early, and I didn't know what it was called until recently, but yeah, you definitely can. It's just that most people aren't educated enough, disciplined enough to say no to the shiny things. And so therefore they get distracted from, if that's their goal, they can definitely achieve it. But if it's not, or if other things become a priority, then no.
So you'd want to have the goal of an age, so say 45, not the goal of the boat and the house with the swimming pool. You have to decide on something, because there must come a point where, despite what money you have, there is a point where you have to stop working and stop earning.
Well, I kind of look at it in a way that, you've got to earn a certain amount to have a little bit more up your sleeve to invest. So the first goal is to earn as much as you can, I guess. And then the ability to only spend as much of that much that you earn. So therefore, you need to have surplus left over to invest. So I guess the more you earn, the less you spend, and the more surplus you have or what's left over, then the likelihood of you retiring earlier is greater. But if you spend that on toys, shiny things, all the things that make you maybe feel good in the moment, the more it sabotages your retirement plan.
I know you well enough to know that you have a few shiny things. How conscious are you of super and the ability for that to play into your early retirement?
Oh, don't quote me on this, but yeah, I don't care for super at this point in my life.
You're not throwing extra in and using that as a tax deduction or anything like that?
There are some great tax deductions in super.
You're not doing it.
And there's some great planning in super, in time. I don't want to strive for a 65-year-old retirement. What I want to do is have the ability to retire sooner. And to do that, for me, has been through a little bit of shares, but mostly investment properties. And so far, that formula is working really well. And there are some advantages from a business and a personal point of view where I can throw a fair bit into super in time. But if I was solely working on super, 65 doesn't cut it for me, or 67, I think even 70 for some. That doesn't cut it for me. I want to have the ability or the choice to retire sooner.
You do love your job and your business, though. What's the point of setting yourself up?
I love what I do. And the more I think about retirement, the more I think I'd probably do the exact same thing. But it's probably the key word's choice. The ability to choose to do whatever you like. I enjoy waking up. I enjoy helping people. I enjoy, training. I enjoy working with my team. It's probably more the days that you go, I don't feel like doing that. When you're retired, you can choose not to, or choose to do a little bit less of what you do now. So, I call that the retirement now model. So choose to do what you want to do now and come up with a more sustainable model that eventually equals a point in your life, whatever age that is, to retire. And then you can enjoy your journey as well, rather than work your guts out, go live like a poor person, sacrifice so many things. And, I kind of look at that and go, that's great, retire early, but I also go, you got to enjoy it along the way.
Let's say I'm in my 30s or 40s and haven't really been aiming for early retirement. Is it too late? Have I left it too late?
One of the books which motivated me or helped me achieve my first investment property was called Property Investment by Jan Summers. And they talked about a person in buying their first investment property at 75. And I was like, that's cool, because you're not going to, you still got life. It's not like you hit 65 and go, oh, stop investing, stop living life, stop thinking of your financial future. Well, most people are averaging around 80 now. Well, 65, 15 years. Well, that's 15 years you've still got something to work towards. And usually people die not long after 65 purely because they run out of things to aim towards, whether it be work, whether it be financial motivation, whether it be sport, whatever it may be. So I kind of say, well, if you're always aiming towards something, then you're on a journey that you enjoy, but also it probably keeps the brain and the body ticking over.
So if age isn't a barrier then, 25 or 65, how do you get started? What's the first thing you would do?
Yeah, so A, earn as much as you can. B, come up with a good budget that is sustainable, that you can afford to live, afford to buy a toy every now and then, go on a holiday. So therefore, you're not living this daily grind that you don't enjoy.
You don't want to sacrifice too much.
Not
along
too
the
much,
way.
and don't give away too much. I think that happy medium where you can kind of, whether you're on your own or whether you have a partner, you can sit together and go, well, what do I want it to look like? And it is important that you talk about it purely for the fact that if you're on one journey and they're on another, so if one likes to spend and one likes to save, there's usually going to be a Barney at some point. So then what it means is you've got what you need and you can enjoy life, but there's no point just building up a kitty in the bank account, because effectively, if that interest rate, is typically far lower than especially inflation right now, well, you're going backwards. So it's important to make sure that surplus is allocated towards something that has good growth and is planning for your future. Because as I said, if it's sitting in a bank account, it's just sitting there. If it's sitting in investment property, it's still just sitting there. It might as well work towards, a future for you, retirement-wise, or shares as well.
Shares scare me a bit, only because my parents have never really done it. I don't have anyone in my life that I can ask about it. Is that an important part, that idea of a mentor or someone you can actually just get a bit of advice from just to get started in the first instance?
Heck yeah. So I've always had people around me in real estate, in property, who know that stuff pretty well, now operating in the building industry. You naturally gravitate towards, and what you know. And it's really important that you operate within your skill set. So hence why I operate mostly around property. Shares, I do dabble in shares, but I don't know enough about it to excel in it. So rather than fight that, I just embrace what I know. And there's every bit of data that says shares actually perform slightly better than the investment properties. However, what typically happens is most people will make it up 100 grand in shares and they'll get a slightly greater return, whereas people will borrow, make it up 700 grand and go and throw it in property. So the percentage return on 700 grand is typically greater than the percentage return on the 100, because people typically don't go and borrow 700 grand to throw in shares because it's a decent gamble.
Now, I note you haven't started playing golf every Friday just yet, but you are your own boss and you can do what you need to do with the kids, and it gives you a bit of flexibility. Can this business be part of your retirement journey? Can anyone's business be actually part of retirement?
So as much as the statistics say that 80% of businesses fail in the first 5 years, but there's also a statistic, and I can't quote it off the top of my head, but there's a statistic that says anyone that owns a business is likely to retire earlier, right, if they choose to. And the reason I say choose to, because some people are so trapped in their business as well. But, what it does is it gives you the ability to, whether you set up family trusts or certain structures that allow you to have some great tax advantages, but it also allows you to pay yourself a certain amount, depending whether it be high or low, which means that if you're smart, you can actually use that surplus to go and invest and take advantage of the tax, advantages that it has around certain investments.
Because that's the other thing, is the ability to, reduce your taxable income and use that money to then reinvest. Do you suggest having a good accountant and things like that, someone that can help you with the process?
Yeah, I think regardless of an accountant, you need to research yourself. So there's plenty of things you can do without your accountant. So Domain every single day. I look at Domain every single day.
Even if you're not buying today?
Even if I'm buying or not. So I look at, interest rates. I look at articles. I will go attend open houses. I'll look at certain corner blocks that I may be able to subdivide. You need to get educated in that space. And, I liken it to, the football player who's playing reserve grade who says, I'll train really hard if I make first grade. Well, no, it's too late.
Train as if you're playing for first grade.
That's it. Because when the opportunity pops up, you're ready to jump on it. Your finance is good to go. You can make a sensible decision then and there. I think it's really important to do that. Don't get me wrong. Your accounting conversation helps with how do I minimise tax? How do I afford this potentially? Maybe to have extra input on that. What structures do I have, whether it be buying in a family trust, buying a company or buying personally? All that comes into play. But initially, just get started on, getting a good understanding of the market.
One of the things I would say then about you using Domain every day and checking things out, and you'd see a bargain if it came along. You'd know about the increase in prices and what your other investments might be doing. Like, it's actually just research, even when you're not thinking it's research.
Well, I was living, at my previous property, and I was looking for my future house, and all of a sudden this one popped up, and I went, "Hang on a second, that's not my house, but I could probably subdivide this thing." And then all of a sudden I was like, well, yes, I can. And it was too good of an opportunity to not do it, not buy that property, which then allowed me to build up some equity through subdivision. And then eventually with that helped me buy my future home. So sometimes it might be a bit of an extra step, but buying that investment property or constantly researching presents opportunity, and then you have the choice to act on it.
So are you selling along the way?
I don't. I've only ever sold one and I regret it. So I hold all my investment properties purely for the fact that I like passive income. It gives me a sense of security. So I'm looking for, in time, passive income, cash flow, as opposed to I've just collected and made a stack of money. Additionally to that is the bank will recognise equity, and they'll recognise, good portions of that equity, if not sometimes 100% of that equity. Whereas when you sell a property, if it's not your own, capital gains tax, selling fees, all those sorts of things. So therefore you lose a good chunk of that equity.
Of your profits that you've just gone all made, and all the hard work is halved.
Exactly. So I kind of say, well, instead of selling it and losing that, I say, well, let's keep all of it and the income and the rental income that it produces and use that to then go buy another one.
And there comes a point where the equity helps you buy the next one, but is there too much debt at some point?
Well, you got to look at, what capital growth you're going to get. So that helps with, the benefit and the returns to gain equity and to get the through capital growth. But there's the component, which is cash flow. You need the serviceability of the loan. So, I'm somebody that typically could invest in a high capital growth area, but sometimes the rental returns are way too low to be able to afford it. Or you could afford one, but you couldn't afford two. So I like to find, places that provide great capital growth, maybe not the best, but acceptable capital growth, but they may have high rental returns as well. So therefore I'm not stressed about carrying the debt, and also it means that I still have a great forward-thinking view where I'll get good capital growth.
So you talked about that portfolio and the passive income and that idea of it being security, but it also makes me nervous that I can't service the loan. If I've got several loans and a tenant or two that have pulled out early or something like that all of a sudden I can't pay those loans, does that make you nervous? Should I be nervous?
Yeah, so the banks, have got a system now where you have to factor in, I think it's 2.5% or 3% serviceability. And actually, in more recent times, it's right at the top end of that, and where people actually will have to be testing that or proving that they can survive that. I always say, can you afford X amount of dollars? And if you can, invest up to that amount, obviously, with the allowance of interest rate rises.
Meaning if the tenant wasn't paying you for a month, could you pay it?
Yeah, so there's different formulas that people use, but at the moment, in our region, I think it's 1% or less than 1% vacancy rate. So
you'd get a tenant, is what
you'd get a tenant, and the likelihood of being without a tenant is usually a couple of weeks. I've had ones where move out on the Friday and someone's in on the Sunday, and you don't miss out. And then there's commercial properties; they have greater returns, but sometimes they go for longer periods, or it's a little bit more niche and you can miss out. So that's why I tend to operate more in residential, just to minimise that risk and still be accepting good capital growth.
In my experience, it's only really ever the bank that, one, scares me, makes me a bit nervous about what I can and can't do, but also says no, not an option. Have you got some ways around that? Should I be shopping around? Should I use a mortgage broker? If my everyday bank says you're not good for another house, should I fight them on it?
Well, so the bank's always got their own their own sort of goals and their own sort of it's skewed. It's all in their favour. It's like the casino. That's effectively what it is. They play the odds game, and the odds are either in their favour or they're in your favour, and likely going to be in their favour. Whereas I guess the benefit of a broker is, hey, I'm going to give you the best outcome regardless. That's what they have to legally sign up for. And so the benefit of that is you go, great, they might have 260 lenders at their screening, so to speak, and come back to you with, sort of 2 or 3 that are the best, no matter what, versus that one banker, and all the work in that one person, as I said, is skewed in their favour. So put the 260 to work, which is skewed in your favour.
So shop around a bit.
Shop around a little bit. That's the short
Find
version.
a mortgage broker that will make it happen.
Yeah, and more so now than ever, just purely because interest rates are on the way up. People do need to refinance. There are banks fighting for your business because they know people are disappearing. And so therefore, better interest rates and even bonuses. So sign up to a loan. They might give you $3,500 onboarding. And there you go, there's $3,500. So you could be... You could spend that. You could treat it as cash flow. You could chuck it straight back in a loan and say, thanks for paying part of my interest.
If you had a sizable savings account and a mortgage, would you have it in the offset account and keep your mortgage low and keep the interest low? Or would you be investing in something else today?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of, actually there's the offset option, but usually at a slightly greater discount is the lowest interest rate you can get, as long as it has free redraws facility. So it's nearly like you can throw it in there and redraw it at any time.
Take it when you want it.
Yep, which is great. But the best thing you can do is have a low, I guess.
The lowest interest rate.
Well, lowest interest rate, but also the lowest amount of amount owing or lowest loan in your own property, because it's not tax deductible. But what you do is you keep that low, but then you leverage that and go buy another investment property and borrow 100% of that if you can. Circumstances, obviously take that into consideration. But if you can have the higher loan in the investment property, fully tax deductible on the interest, whereas your personal isn't, so therefore keep that as low as possible.
Over the 20-something years you've been investing then, what's been the most challenging part? What have you learnt?
Probably the mental hurdles initially. So my first investment property was $127,500, and the bank would only lend me $119,000. And I was like, whoa, I've got to come up. I've got to come up with a difference. But what was great is I learnt really quickly, and it was something that really hit me between the eyes, was the repayments on that were, I can't even remember, let's make it up, $130 a week. And the rent I was getting was $155. And I think within 3 months, the real estate agent was like, hey, this should be about $180. So I'm positively geared, and I just bought a property that really only cost me sort of $8,500. And I'm going, so effectively this thing's free. So I learned that really early on. I was like, great, let's go find more positively geared, or let's go find things that are low cost to get into. And it just means that you can accrue or grow in your equity and not cost you anything. So that was great. But as for the hurdle, stamp duty, killer, land tax, killer. So what you've got to overcome there is, do I pay it up front? Do I borrow it? What will the banks allow me to do? And so therefore, you're pretty much paying money, which sucks for nothing. It's not a deductible, it's a tax. So you've got to pay it. And the more you get, the more they charge you and the more land tax there is. So there's a bit of a deterrent there, and I get why, in the best interest of the government and the way it's serviced and, affordability and whatnot, and to deter people from stealing all the investment properties from first home buyers. But at the same time, you're also not going to put a drain on the economy through, hey, can I get, the pension and all those certain costs that come with that as well.
A bit like our first question, McDonald's or KFC, the state government has reformed stamp duty lately. Stamp duty today, pay it up front, or land tax over years for the length of owning the property.
Yeah, super tricky. So
what would you do?
Circumstantial, right? Definitely. So I'm somebody that I would prefer to pay the stamp duty knowing that I owe no more money and I don't have to fork out whatever it is, $3,000
Even if you're adding it to the loan?
Um,
Because you can't afford it?
It's more, yeah. So that's what I was going to say. So if you could take that option around the stamp duty and pay it back over time, if the capital gain is greater than that cost, as an investment, it actually makes sense. So, tricky, but for me, I go, well, great, if I can pay the stamp duty now, I might as well, because I'd rather know what I can pay. It's like interest-free, buying a fridge. You can get a fridge with 3 months interest-free, but I don't know what my circumstances are going to be in year 2. So I just pay with what I got. Doesn't make financial sense, but it does to me because I know that my liabilities are low.
Lender's mortgage insurance, LMI, is often the barrier to the first home. If people don't have the deposit, they have to pay some insurance, and it's just another cost. Would you let that stop you? What advice would you say to someone who's like, oh, I have to pay LMI, I just don't have the deposit?
Yeah, so we talking first home?
Yeah, just people getting started that are like, you know what?
Yeah, that's super tricky because it's just another cost, and it's not cheap. But I get why it's there, and it's pretty much the insurance, for the banks. But there is something about owning your own home and that Australian dream, and I totally get it. So if it means that you can afford to do it, like servicing the loan, and it means that potentially sometimes it's less than your rent, and it means you can invest in your future and then have a house that eventually builds equity and maybe let you go again, do it every day of the week. But I also get that that's an extra cost that in theory doesn't go to anything, but it gives you opportunity to go into something that you never would have been able to.
So you mentioned one regret, the selling of the house initially, one of the first investments. Any other regrets?
Not really. Probably because I've always been someone that's played the long game. I'm not in it for the quick win because it is my retirement plan. It is my thing that eventually all these things will be paid off and it'll generate a good passive income, which gives, back to the start, choice to work, choice not to work, choice to do whatever you like, because it's not a decision based on finance. And that's the ultimate outcome for me, is come up with a model where I don't have to worry about finances anymore. And I think that's something I strive for.
When you see your kids growing up now, what advice do you give them? What do you instill in them? What do you hope they will take from you as a businessman but an investor?
This sounds really arrogant, but we'll drive past one of the investment properties and I'll point and go, hey, that's one of Dad's houses. And you just see the kids like, how's that work? And I said, oh, we'll own that. And he goes, well, and he goes, do people pay you to live there? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, oh, I want to have a house so people can pay me to live there. And it sounds terrible, but those little things, you can see it sort of go into their brain and they go, oh, that actually could make me money one day. And, I don't say go save, you need to do this, you need that. Don't get me wrong. I want them to work hard. I want them to save their pennies. But I don't want them thinking about investment properties right now and in that burden to go with it. I want them to be kids and enjoy themselves. But at the same time, I also can see that little bit of a seed being planted right now. And my kids are pretty smart and they take that in. And I know one day they're going to have a crack at it.
You can see the cogs turning.
Yeah, definitely.
So give us some tips then. How do we enjoy today while also planning for the future, early retirement, extra investments?
Yeah, so the big one's finding, being content. Figuring out what that sort of part of your life or every part of your life, what makes you content, and strive for that. That's the biggest goal you can have. And so what I tend to work with a lot of my clients with is coming up with the trilogy of finance. So in their case, they have a business. How much do you need in the bank account to feel okay? Reduce the anxiety levels. How much profit do you need to make? And then out of that, you go, how much do I need to pay myself? Just an income to survive, pay the bills, go on a holiday every now and then go, great, I'm content with that. And just find that peace with that. And then I just say anything beyond that, let's throw towards our future, because there's something about the journey you go on. There's something about the peace that you go on, knowing that you're striving for something, that one day that's going to come to fruition. And so what it means is you're content, you're on a journey, it's exciting, and you get to enjoy your life along the way.
I know loads of people in your life come to you for advice and just to talk things through because of your experience and because of what you've managed to achieve in a short time. Thank you for talking us through some of it today.
Thank you very much, Dan.